always been trying to use technology to enable people. But what I don't want it to do is replace them. I don't want my children to grow up into a world where they're just controlled by AI bots. I want them to grow into a world where they can control AI to enjoy their lives.
Incredibly powerful influence on everybody, but especially people growing up with this technology. And if it's not done right, that can cause a lot of problems. I honestly really believe that the effective implementation of AI done in the right way, in an ethical manner, can have such a positive impact. Businesses. Cool. So, hey, everybody, my name is Ben Brand and welcome to the It Matters podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today by my business partner in It Matters, James Lang. And yeah, ultimately, this is the very first episode of the It Matters AI podcast. And we're just going to kind of frame like what we're all about in terms of our business, what this podcast is all about, and hopefully provide you with some massive value. So, yeah, we've got a list of questions, and at the risk of me kind of talking too much, the format's going to be quite simple. I'm going to ask some of the questions. James is going to give his responses, and we'll kind of go through what I've described. So maybe just to kick things off, James, if I may, why don't you just tell everybody listening a little bit about yourself and your background, just to get things going.
I'll just start with first saying, Ben, thank you, and I'm really, really excited about this journey. You and I have worked together for many years, way back into the military, and I have to say this is a really exciting chapter for me to be working with you on this on our next journey. So I'd like to start there. Well, for those that don't know me, as I just alluded to, I spent 22 years in the military, which I was very fortunate. I kind of worked in the special comms area, where I was delivering information systems to commanders at the forefront of in the battle space. And I've worked in almost every headquarters of every shape and size, providing commanders with information systems. And it was just towards the end of my military career, this is where I met Ben, is I was asked by our corps colonel to develop the Army's first cyber protection teams, which I wrote a paper about. It got endorsed. There was some excitement. Yeah, the cyber protection teams were formed. I did my last 5 years in the military, left, became a consultant, worked on some very big, I call them data science projects at the time, but clearly they were using the early capabilities of what we have now, AI. And I used these to really good effect in cybersecurity for government organizations. But now, and hopefully this is the next chapter that I'm working with Ben, it's now to me is, how do I take my 22 years of military knowledge, how do I take this 7 years of consulting and helping leaders use information systems to make better decisions, and how do I take that to the private sector? And more importantly, how do I take it to those small SMEs that are really battling with, how do I use AI, when do I use it, and how do I do it in a reliable and resilient and responsible way? So hopefully that touched on me. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, James. I appreciate your kind words, and maybe just to kind of like echo the sentiment sort of at the end there. I do think, and completely and utterly agree, that AI is an absolute game changer, and to a degree really levels the playing field. And there are so many use cases where small, medium businesses can fundamentally get so much more capability now in their business compared to larger organizations through effectively leveraging AI. But a lot of that comes not so much from what technology is available, but actually understanding and being aware of it, which is where working with trusted partners really comes in. So yeah, just to kind of pivot off what you said, James, and give a quick intro on myself. So equally, obviously, we met in the military. I wasn't in the military for as long as James, did around 13 years. And my initial journey was through military intelligence. So I spent the majority of my career doing that. And the last 5 years, probably most relevant to this episode today, is I specifically worked in cybersecurity, and probably pivoting, well, sort of leaning quite heavily on the fact I've always been a bit of a geek. Found something that I think I was naturally sort of quite good at. And it was a really good blend of my kind of natural technical skill set and also the kind of training I'd had as a military intelligence specialist. Great sort of time, and obviously I've enjoyed working with yourself, James, massively throughout that. Learned a lot, and really kind of one of the main takeaways I got was really starting to understand structures of organizations and how they use data and information, and seeing it being done well, maybe seeing it being done not so well at different times, but also seeing how organizations really need to kind of stay ahead and ultimately make best use of technology, but also resources to get the best effect. So following my time in the military, I actually got straight into entrepreneurship. Ended up in real estate for a few years, where, to be honest, learned a lot, had some sort of positives, had some negatives, but ultimately kind of that's, the entrepreneurial journey. And I'll tell you right now, setting up a real estate business during COVID is not always the easiest thing. But like anything, that actually develops me a massive opportunity, because I then ended up looking at kind of what my skill set was aligned with, and also my interests. And I ended up starting a marketing company. And while initially it was kind of a fairly vanilla marketing company where we went out and sort of ran adverts for clients, very quickly that enabled me to really delve into my more technical sort of skills. And it was at a really exciting time because AI was just starting to come in, and we started developing our own in-house use cases for building AI chatbots for ourselves, for our clients, and really kind of just being able to get really sort of big leverage and scale through technology for the people we worked with. And yeah, one thing's led to another, and actually I'm back doing some cybersecurity consultancy now as well. But equally, just want to kind of echo what you said, James, which is that really excited to be on this journey now. I think we're for both of us and also anyone listening to this, I think we're all blessed in terms of where the world is at in terms of sort of the evolution of technology. And actually, if you jump on board the train, which seems to be speeding up and up, it's a really interesting place to be. And actually, it's it's a real dynamic environment to be able to create. It's almost like now the only limitation is, I suppose, the ones we impose upon ourselves in terms of what we can make, the ways that you can combine technologies to make some really amazing solutions to ultimately help businesses, help people make decisions, etc., through the use of AI.
I have to truly agree with you, Ben. I really do think the limitations in the future is just people's imagination, because whereas before you may have been constrained by resources, well, the type of resources you can get your hands on with an agent now would cost you a lot in human resources to do this. So I do think that we're entering a world where the only limitation is people's imagination. And also, I think you'll start to see those that imagine stuff and those that are action orientated and do stuff. That they'll be the ones with the right imagination and the right motivation will succeed in this world.
No, I completely agree. I think just kind of moving on to our next question. I think we've kind of both slightly touched upon it, but I'd like to kind of like put it to the fore. I think I'd like you to kick off, James, by just describing why we have started It Matters. So not just this podcast, but also our business of the same name. What's the kind of like the journey, and what is the purpose of what we do?
So for me, I've got two children, and I know we've got children of similar ages, but Ben is 3 and Elizabeth's 5. And I think I'm really interested in a couple of things around that. Is well, what does the future of employment look like for Elizabeth and Ben? And also, what does education look like? Is our current education system fit for purpose? Now, I know that these are really big, deep philosophical problems, and society will work out and shape those. But I believe that we've made the mistakes with the internet, with mobile phones, with social media. We've given this technology to children and expected them to get on with it. And I think we can't afford to do that with AI. So not only am I worried about that, I'm worried about how do CEOs implement AI in a reliable, resilient, and responsible way, so that I look at all organizations live in an ecosystem, in society, and what we need to do is make sure that we create a society that's fit for purpose for our children. And I think that's what I'm really passionate about. It really is. One, I've always loved getting computers to do stuff for people to get their to make their lives a bit more easier. Even when I did my A levels, I wrote a computer program for a doctor's surgery because they were all paper based, and I was like, oh, we can do this more efficiently. So my inner geek, as you've mentioned before, has always been trying to use technology to enable people. But what I don't want it to do is replace them. I don't want my children to grow up into a world where they're just controlled by AI bots. I want them to grow into a world where they can control AI to enjoy their lives. And hopefully amazing. It makes sense. I mean, I'll hand that question back over to you, Ben. What is your passions and why are you doing it?
Yeah, well, maybe just to kind of pivot off your point around an element of this, really thinking like how you can positively impact the kind of shape of AI on the behalf of your kids. Similarly, I think just maybe even like a use case the other day, my eldest daughter, who's 8, she was basically almost looking for some advice, and she kind of unprompted said to me, should we ask ChatGPT? And it kind of at the time really stuck in my head, because she was already seeing ultimately the use of an AI chatbot as a confidant, somebody to provide advice for her. And that's not really something I've pre-programmed. I've obviously taught her lots about the responsible use of AI as much as possible, but I think that one use case alone really highlighted in my mind that this is incredibly powerful influence on everybody, but especially people growing up with this technology. And if it's not done right, that can cause a lot of problems. But yeah, kind of going back to my involvement in It Matters and sort of why I wanted to kind of build and start the company and grow it. And it kind of comes back to the point we made previously. It doesn't really matter what stage of a journey a business is on. I honestly really believe that the sort of the effective implementation of AI done in the right way, in an ethical manner, can have such a positive impact. Business isn't easy, just to be completely blunt. We know the statistics about businesses that go out, they don't last 5 years, don't last 10 years, etc. But ultimately, there is a tool now wasn't available 5 years ago, where businesses can legitimately reduce overheads while improving quality if they integrate the use of AI in a cohesive manner, looking at the top use cases in their business. And the thing is, AI, there's a lot of use cases we can talk about in a minute in terms of like more specific instances, but nearly every business needs some forms of sales and marketing, to be blunt. If you're in the private sector, you have to do that. There are so many good use cases now where we're not talking about replacing people here, we're talking about augmenting them. And actually, we've seen AI do some amazing things when implemented properly, but equally in terms of sort of admin or actually just getting general advice and potentially sort of bits around sort of legalities, compliance. The effective use of AI and also having a good framework to implement it with is, I think, incredibly important. And it isn't just small, medium businesses, to be frank, where this benefits. Large businesses might have a bigger budget to actually implement AI or cohesively think about it more, but they're obviously, the issue they've got is actually creating a culture around AI and getting it used correctly throughout the organization. So it doesn't really matter what level it is. There's not, I think, a correct argument that, it needs to be
I agree
embraced.
with you completely, and I think it goes back to the cyber vulnerability project we worked on before, and where I was really interested in the democratization of cybersecurity, because again, cybersecurity is one of those environments where yes, you can secure yourself, but guess what? You need £1 million box for this. You need £1 million box for that. How expensive these things are, but then your company is safe. Well, how does a school, a charity, an SME defend itself in that space? And I think I want to take those principles and bring them into AI, because I think it's all about democratization. If we're really going to create a world where everybody has access to this capability, we need to do that. We need to develop tools and solutions that can help an SME. And I really like the idea of, we know once we've got a solution that can help an SME, we can scale it up. But I'd rather go that way than trying to work with big primes, and they're not our market segment anyway, but working on very, very expensive solutions that we can't translate into society's benefit. And I think that's where I'm really interested in. How do we help, the smaller, medium type organizations?
Amazing. Well, you know what, James, you almost prompted the next question, so I'm going to kind of segue into it better. But who do you think this podcast is for? So you obviously said it's small SMEs, so maybe you could even kind of give like maybe some examples of sectors. But yeah, be really keen to hear your thoughts around just who can get value out of listening to this episode and future episodes of this podcast, but equally who might get value out of talking to us in the context of It Matters as a consultancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly do think that where I'm trying to aim this is at what I would call an AI leader. And that is anybody who has decided that a large part of their strategy moving forward, no matter what their size of organization, is using AI. But all things, they have worries, because we know it's expensive. If it's done wrong, it can cause all sorts of HR problems, ethics problems, and with our experience, we've been through a large part of that, and we've worked out frameworks to mitigate against that. And I do believe that is where we can add value, is those people that are curious, concerned, anxious about the adoption of AI, but feel that they absolutely must do it to stay competitive. You've already mentioned companies don't live beyond the 3 to 5 year mark. Well, that might even be shorter with AI in the world. So I do get the worries and the fears, but we're there just to have conversations, and that's what this podcast should really be about. It's that thought leadership, and it's helping leaders that are going to make those big strategic muscle moves decide when to do it and how to do it. And that's what this podcast should be about and who it should be for.
Yeah, No, I agree. 100%. I think it's for leaders that, and it doesn't really matter where they are at in their journey, as long as they've pretty much come to the realization AI needs to be something that they embrace in their business going forward. If they aren't already, then we're here to provide, in my opinion, content for people that are either just starting that journey, but equally are quite far down. And ultimately, we talk to kind of a lot of people in the space already, and some of them have already got internal teams working on this. They're quite rightly they're consuming resources and integrating as best as they can. But we've already also touched upon is this is such a dynamic space and the rate of change is absolutely difficult to keep up in many regards. So actually having sort of external resources where you've got people on your side that are ultimately are triaging the information and trying to provide you with the right stuff to do AI in the right way, I think is imperative. So yeah, I agree. I think that's what this podcast is all about. So
Absolutely, Ben. And before you were mentioning about the utility of AI for small, but I'd also like to say that one of the really cool approaches that I use it quite a lot is actually using AI to help with your strategic landscaping, and also testing assumptions of your business model. So you said businesses fail in those 3 to 5 years, but I do think that with using AI in those type of contexts to test assumptions to help plan to forecast, it could actually really help you survive. And again, I just think there's a lot of opportunity for us to use the experience we've had, the problems we've had, and through very simple strategic workshops, be able to get organizations using AI reliably, resiliently, and responsibly.
yeah, absolutely. I think kind of pivoting off that then, because again, I think we kind of touched on the periphery of it here, but what kind of episodes can listeners expect to kind of have coming up, just to give a flavour of the kind of topics we're going through? And I know I've kind of thrown that in out the blue,
Yeah,
James, but I think an example would be obviously the strike frameworks, probably something we'd want to work through, probably
yeah, yeah,
line by line as an
yeah,
example,
yeah.
talking about use cases, interviews. So yeah, maybe if you could maybe expound on some of those, give some extras, I think that would be quite useful.
Yeah, so I think it's very key that we keep this. I always say, when you're coming up with strategy, it's got to be executable. And I certainly consider my podcast, and I'm very interested in the philosophy of AI and some of the bigger problems around epistemology and pluralism and all these really cool terms, which provide no benefit to a CEO that basically just needs to have a good use case and implement it.
Yeah.
So I think, as you said, Ben, we need to start there. And as you alluded to, that's why we developed the strike framework, right? And I use the strike framework. I've adapted it from all the big projects I've worked on. And it really is to put just-in-time governance in place. Because at the end of the day, before you go away and you invest into AI, it can go wrong in so many ways so quickly. And I truly believe by doing a very light touch workshops within a framework, you can make sure that you've got the right pathway through to success. And that's what the strike framework does. And I'll go through each one very quickly, but as you said, they will become future themes for the podcast. So S is all just about strategic alignment. And when I say strategic alignment, if you haven't got your board or your senior leadership on board with this, with a use case that adds value to the board, so it needs to be linked to return of investment or an efficiency saving, an operational saving that is measurable. So first and foremost, it's got to be something that's measurable, and when you've delivered this use case, it's going to be beneficial to your board. Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who pay the bills. I've seen so many AI
Yeah.
projects where people have either built it and the board didn't know, and it had an ethical problem, and it could have been dealt with right at the beginning with a quick workshop, or they've burnt out too much money because of it's expensive, and they've tried to adapt and create their own models in-house, and it's exploded in technical complexity, or they've got it and they don't even know they're using it. And there's a lot of shadow AI going on in organizations as well, so
Yeah.
just don't know about the knowledge. So S is all about strategic alignment. The T is all about technical integration, but it's a bit more than that. It's about the people, the data, and making sure you have got a stack from strategy all the way through to implementation to be able to implement it effectively. I like putting this in. This is about risk awareness. And this, before you go away and jump into it, just do a light touch risk assessment. Does it pass, as we know in the military, the daily mirror test? just enough ethics just to think about that. Would it, if you put this on in the newspaper, front page of the newspaper, is your
Yeah.
use case going to pass that litmus test? That's a good little test, you know. So is it going to be reliable? It's robust enough. You need to make sure that it's not flaky, and you need to make sure that it's going to be reliable. It needs to be integrated into your company and be reliable. And then the final bit is, and this is all about the resilience. And I see a lot of organizations implementing AI, using it, but they haven't thought about the negative consequences of the misuse. So where could it go wrong? Or the cyber vulnerabilities is, our key strength here. On how you've opened up your organization to massive vulnerabilities that affect Marks and Spencers as we speak right now,
Mhm.
that open yourself up to ransomware attack and things. So that's what the R's about. But it's almost quite a very loose touch element of governance wrapped around your use case and ensuring you touch your strategy. So the I is all about integration. And to me, a real successful use case that is integrated and implemented successfully is really around rich human experiences.
Mhm.
And this is where we talk about AI with a human touch. This is where we need to think about that. We need to, I jokingly say, we need to ensure it creates smiley faces. And if it's not creating smiley faces for your client, for your staff, for yourself, then it's not right. If it's causing more pain, more stress, then it's not the right use case. Finally, the K, the knowledge management. Now, most organizations struggle with the knowledge that's tapped into their staff's heads, and they struggle to manage all this knowledge just in their day-to-day execution of their business function. Now, imagine an organization with all of these agents. How were they taught? What are their approach to knowledge? Or
Mhm.
how do they make decisions? How do you know what your organization knows? And there's a huge amount of knowledge management that needs to be encapsulated in this. And also the data that the algorithm was trained on, and when things go wrong, how to unpick those or how to improve them. So that is quite key. And we really need to talk on the knowledge management of AI systems. And then finally, the E is about evaluation. Continuously, we need to evaluate as we go through each of those pillars, the R, the I, and the K. We need to ensure that we're actually continuously evaluating so that you're strategically aligned and you are continuously improving. Because at the end of the day, an organization that's fit for the future is one that's continuously learning, adapting, and being resilient. And that's what the Strike framework does. It puts a little light touch on a use case to ensure we deliver success in a reliable, resilient, and responsible way.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that's a really good overview of the Strike framework. I think it's what's worth doing is putting that in a bit of context. So, the two kind of primary offerings of It Matters in terms of our consultancy at the moment are a 5-day workshop, and yeah, James, feel free to append on the back of this. But ultimately, it's AI Accelerator designed for AI leaders, as we mentioned before previously, i.e., business owners who are ready to kind of take that next step or are already down the path of using AI, where we work through the Strike framework, which James has just gone through, to ultimately help find where AI can be implemented in your business in the best manner possible, round whatever the best mechanism, be that ROI or ethical integration, etc. But really help provide you with that kind of oversight and reporting at the end to help you take that next step. Would you agree with that in terms of just a quick overview of the Accelerator?
Absolutely. It's all about providing, leaders again with a bit of insight, a little bit of a roadmap that says, look, I'm interested in doing this. Let's look at the use cases. Let's focus on one high deliverable use case and provide a leader with an ability to translate his desire to use AI with a roadmap for success.
Fantastic. And the other offering we have at the moment is what we will term another 5-day package, but it's a 5-day rapid proof of concept package, which ultimately is, again, for business owners or AI leaders where they have a strong idea of a use case. Now, it might be something that we've actually identified in our workshop, to be blunt, or it might be that they already have gone far enough down the path that they have got a really strong use case, an example being an AI chatbot, for example, to help their sales process. And they need a trusted partner to come in and produce a rapid proof of concept so that they can ultimately test if this is going to add value to their business. So we're lucky enough that we've got a team behind us that can actually deliver these kind of solutions. So yeah, that's the kind of other offering we have at the moment, is a 5-day workshop to help translate that kind of initial reporting that we kind of provide you with, and actually turn that into something substantial if required, so you can really see how that fits in your business. Does that make sense, James? Or you got any sort of hand on that?
Absolutely. As I said, I've seen it time and time again. People spend a lot of money trying to turn an idea into reality. The great thing is we've got strategic partners as well that will provide us with platforms and environments to actually very quickly scale up something at limited cost to be able to demonstrate that their hypothesis for the use case is a valid one. That's what that really is all about. I don't think you need to spend huge amounts of time in consulting worrying about this. It's about instrumental focus on some key elements, and then just getting it done in a very short order to develop a proof of concept. By all means, clearly you've got a transition afterwards, and that's going to take a little bit longer, but at least you now know that your hypothesis is valid and it's worth going on a journey to integrate it and make that transition for your workforce.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think there's maybe something that's worth articulating that we haven't, well, we kind of touched upon, but is that I think between the two of us especially, we've got a swathe of experience working with a whole range of clients fundamentally, from obviously a lot of government stuff between us, be that MOD, Home Office, etc. But we've also worked with very large entities and private organisations, all the way down to SMEs, kind of even solopreneurs. So yeah, I think it's something, a real flavour that I think both of us will bring to anyone that we're working with, is ultimately that kind of holistic view of how they can do this effectively.
Yeah, sorry, Ben, I'd just like to echo that. And I think that's really valid, because we really are wanting to work with a diverse set of people. We want to test things in different environments. So we remain flexible with that. Please don't anybody feel that they're not big enough to want to go on a journey of experimentation. I think those that succeed into the future are those that are trying to implement it now. So yeah, Ben, I completely echo that.
Awesome. Thank you, James. Well, I think there's loads of detail in there for people to unpick. So I'm kind of, even though I've got probably another 7 or 8 questions I could easily ask, I think I want to intentionally kind of like draw this one to a close so that people got a bit of time on their hands. But yeah, maybe like the final couple to end with are, what would you say, James, of all the things we've discussed, what's your number one takeaway that you'd give to people to kind of like, that you kind of feel that between our discussion here, they should really kind of like take away from this episode?
I really want people to not be worried about AI, but want to get involved in the conversation. I think it's vital that all of us at least understand it enough, even if we don't feel it's right for us right now, but should still be participating in the dialogue, because I think it's going to become fundamental part of society. It's going to be just as important as understanding local politics or national politics. It's about understanding technological development, and I just think this is the right place for people to be able to listen and to remove some of those anxieties. And that, if we've achieved that, then that's brilliant. If we've helped inform a few more people and just taken away some of that anxiety, then I think this podcast has solved its problem.
No, I completely agree, James. I'm going to paraphrase slightly, but the statistic I think we kind of talked about a couple of weeks ago was how, in the 1920s, 60% of the actual job roles didn't even exist that do today. And it just kind of shows like the passage and evolution of skills, but equally opportunities. And fundamentally, the game hasn't changed. There's always something new on the horizon. There's always, AI is very scary. And some people can perceive AI as being very scary, but actually it's just a continued evolution. Arguably, elements of AI have been around for the last couple of decades, between sort of more traditional machine learning, etc. And this is just the kind of next step, really.
Well, Ben, I've even seen, a little bit more fundamental than that. In 2023, an AI prompt engineer was the job to have, right? That was the de facto job, the new sexy job. You almost in a place where that job's not even needed anymore, because you can now get a prompt engineering tool to help you write really good prompts. And I think this is where we can help, because of how technology is changing so rapidly, with new algorithms coming out almost weekly now. It's almost impossible for a leader to stay up to date with all of this. And this is where those strategic partnerships are useful, where we can help, because we're in this day to day, and we can help people who don't have the capacity to be there, but want to be able to use this technology to their benefit.
Perfect. Yep, couldn't agree more. yeah, that's obviously what I hope we can do fundamentally.
Yeah.
I hope this can be a place where people kind of, they feel there's a lot to learn, but it's approachable fundamentally, and it's done in the right kind of, it's done in the right context, and also, it's meaningful. Fundamentally, we don't just want to this. We're not selling snake oil here. We genuinely both really care and are interested in this technology fundamentally. And it's we're both geeks deep at heart, and this is stuff we enjoy and is our passion. So we want to be able to share that with other people and hopefully help them in the process.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, James. I think this is going to work quite well in terms of a format, a little bit of interview back and forth. Just to kind of wrap things up then. For anyone listening to the podcast today, if you want to connect with myself and James, at the moment, the kind of best point of contact is either to go directly to our website, which is it-matters.ai. We'll include that in the show notes in sort of description below, a direct link, but you can sort of Google that as well. Equally, James and I are probably most present on LinkedIn, so you can search for James. Is it James A. Lang or Ben Brand on LinkedIn? Feel free to connect, follow, etc. And obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, we're available on sort of all the main podcast platforms now. And in time, this will be developed into sort of YouTube content. So you'll find us on all the standard social media platforms as well. So unless I'm missing anything else there, James, or if you've got any final points, we can draw this to a close.
Ben, I'm just going to close with just saying thank you. As I said, it's always great working with you, and I just want to thanks for this. I look forward to seeing the results, continuing on this journey. So just a big thank you.
Thank you to you, mate, as well. Likewise, it's it's very cool. So I think this just some saying I think the stars have aligned in terms of kind of us. We've wanted to work together for a while, and actually, I think the timing's been right, and it's been around the right thing as well, because we're both kind of traditional entrepreneurs in the sense of million different ideas, million different things we can do, but we've been lucky enough to kind of align over something that we've got a joint passion about, and arguably is one of the things that we can help people the most through ultimately doing things like this. So thank you as well.
Well, I'll catch you on the next episode.
Cool. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Bye.